What is up, Fraud Squad? This is a case study based on Chapter 10 in the 6th edition of Fraud Examination. This is presented by the supergroup known as the Harper Hawks. The overarching principle of society is that it functions best when we all pull in the same direction. Fraud examination takes into account a subset of humanity that is out for themselves. Because of pushes or pulls that could be found on the fraud triangle, there are financial criminals. On the other side of the desk are fraud examiners who investigate and interview. Chapter 10 in the textbook deals with the very important subject of interviewing. Interviews can help the investigator understand essential elements of the crime, uncover new leads and evidence in the case, recruit the help of victims or witnesses, and understand motive and background. In this example, Topside Industries operates on a dock in California. Dock hands and supervisors at Topside were colluding to mark goods as missing or damaged in order to sell them on the black market for a profit. Two dock workers suspected in the fraud, Lee and Jackson, were interviewed by Sherman of the security team for a microwave manufacturer that caught on to suspicious activity. The interview was intense. What do I mean by intense? Let's just say that the interviewer may have seen too many episodes of The Sopranos. The interviewer wanted to assert dominance by showing up an hour and a half late. This was his first mistake. Interviewers should be efficient, courteous, polite, and careful with language. Sherman blew his chance at establishing any kind of rapport with the suspects. Sherman also broke a principal rule of interviewing. Don't interview more than one person at a time. The testimony of one respondent will influence the other. Sherman threatened the interviewees with physical violence. The law is clear that confessions cannot be coerced. For a successful interview, the interviewer's demeanor is very important and involves professionalism and commitment to excellence. As we've said, the interviewer should take special care in being efficient, courteous, polite, and careful with the language they use during the interviews. Secondly, methodology is especially important in interviews. One of the basic rules is to question one person at a time and conduct the interview under conditions of privacy. Because the testimony of one respondent will influence the testimony of another, and interviews are best conducted out of sight and sound of colleagues. What could Sherman have done differently to achieve better outcomes? Interviews shouldn't necessarily be quick affairs. You need time to dig deep and uncover relevant facts. Don't be afraid to steer the conversation back on track. You're leading the dance. Don't let the interview go off topic. A good interviewer will be timely, professional, and fair to all respondents. They should be treated with both healthy skepticism and respect. Sherman could have collected as much relevant information about both suspects and conducted a neutral interview, presenting financial statements to the suspects in order to elicit cooperation. A good interview would have uncovered relevant facts and ended on a positive note. Sherman could have started with an introduction, established rapport with the suspects, state the reason for the interview, observe the suspects, and develop the interview with the help of the interviewees. How did Sherman use evidence and facts of the case? Is it ever okay to say, and I quote, "I might just have to leave you here with Bruno. If he beats you silly, well then it'll be your word against his, comprende?" So Sherman was not 100% sure that Lee and Jackson were even the perpetrators of the crime, or even involved at all. He then made false accusations of telling Lee and Jackson that he had a paper trail a mile wide to prove it, along with surveillance tapes and written confessions from Hill and Grant. And no, it is never acceptable to threaten others with physical violence, but especially when conducting an interview. How will the coerced confession hold up in court? According to the idea of the fruit of the poisonous tree, evidence collected illegally is considered tainted by the law and may jeopardize an otherwise strong case. Sherman's demeanor was the opposite of what it should have been. He was not professional in any point of the interview and was attempting to scare the interviewees. Sherman made false allegations towards Lee and Jackson, and he kept them waiting for over an hour and came in like a wrecking ball. Had Sherman been more respectful, considerate, and cautious when interviewing Lee and Jackson, he may have been able to succeed in obtaining the truth from them without threats and the false accusation. Where is the best place to conduct a fraud investigation interview? Is it a place dubbed the interrogation room? No. It should be in an office or workplace for easy access to any necessary papers, books, and other evidence. These locations are generally more convenient and comfortable for the interviewees as well. This should also be done where distractions from colleagues and telephones are non-existent or minimal. Sherman should have also conducted the interviews separately. The interview room is not a suggested interview location, so Sherman met Lee and Jackson in the wrong place. Interrogation rooms are generally associated with criminals, whereas Sherman should not have styled the interview as an interrogation at all. Interrogation and investigation are sensitive words. Sherman should have said something like an inquiry instead. This was a hostile interview, which means that this interview should not have even occurred in the first place. Sherman was the one being hostile by telling them he had what others had said, slamming pen and paper on the desk, yelling, and being threatening. All these are things that should not have occurred. Here is our work cited, and thank you so much for your time and listening to our presentation. Don't be like Sherman, be better.